BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions. Oh yeah, we're doing this. Power Rangers may be coming back, but people have looked back at the series to see what they appreciated and what could have been better if they didn't do so while it was airing. People are now doing the same with Sentai, that it recently ended for now, and with Power Rangers this has happened, especially with the Neo Saban era not being that well received outside of Dino Charge. Ninja Steel was the season that had people questioning if they were going to quit Power Rangers, and while I never felt that way, it was definitely disappointing. The season had an interesting setup. The son of a ninja is kidnapped by an alien show combatant champion for years, escapes with the transformation devices to the Earth, and recruits 4 people with the same powers to take on the monsters the game's staff sends out, alongside trying to find out what happened to his family. The problem was that the heroes had interesting elements that were underexplored in favor of them learning lessons that were questionable at best. The villains weren't given the time to be fleshed out. The mandates forced the comic relief to take time away from both undeveloped groups, alongside restrictions that forced the creators to limit their potential storylines. And arguably the most affected character of the main characters was the Ninja Steel White Ranger, Hayley Foster herself. The girl had no focus episodes to herself. Everything interesting about her was underexplored. The show tended to frame her as this mistreated black person in a relationship who was wrong and always had to apologize, instead of letting her grow despite her boyfriend being and treating her worse. The lack of fight footage hurt her character, and the fact they didn't want to shoot original footage for her all that much. Based on the scrap breakup plotline, it seems they only really cared about doing relationship stories with her, and based on everything, I'm going to rewrite her entire story to give her the justice she deserved. Type either Hayley deserves better or Black Ranger History Month, and let's get started. Hayley's character bio reads, Hayley is an adventurous, outdoorsy girl with a love for nature and healthy living. Doesn't give us a ton to work with, but there's gotta be some story or unique aspects about her before some focus episodes. She's good at improvising in situations. She owns a dog. Guess what his name is in the comment section? If you forgot, I'll give you a hint. She named her Zord after him, but we'll get to him later. So let's get into problem 1. 1. She has no focus episodes to herself. Now, if I have to be generous, Hayley technically has 7 focus episodes out of 44. Doesn't seem too bad, right? Let's go over each one. Episode 6, Redbot tries to ask Hayley out even though he knows Calvin's dating her. So Hayley has to learn that robots have emotions. Obviously, he helped raise Brody. He saves her, and her dog guides the heroes to help do so, but she's able to save her team when they get brainwashed. Good focus on her, but we really learn nothing about her, so 50-50. Episode 11. Hayley and Levi don't trust Aiden, Brody's missing brother who showed up at the end of the previous episode giving his brutal trading methods, and when Brody gets poisoned and the villains wager their powers for the antidote, Hayley and Levi actually come up with a clever plan to make fake power stars made out of chocolate. Good use of Hayley's creativity and Levi's trickery. They didn't need to apologize to Aiden for being a show-off since his sparring was getting way too intense, but I say good episode. Episode 16. Calvin forgets to pick Hayley up. Hayley calls him out, so Calvin competes against her for student president. Victor and Monty cause more conflict. The villains manage to kidnap Brody, Sarah, and Calvin, and they use good footage of Hayley's counterpart to have her and Levi work together against the monster. And we at least get something about her mother being not in her life as she gets to steal her star back. Honestly, great episode for her. Episode 18. She gets the human plot trying to beat Victor in a tennis match, gets turned invisible, and it wins at the end, while Preston's the one with the main Ranger plot. It's harmless and portrays her in a positive light, but this is the third to last episode of season 1, and it doesn't really give us any insight, character development, or plot focus for her. Your verdict on if it's good or not. Super episode 2. It's Calvin and Hayley's anniversary. Calvin forgot, and there's a monster who feeds off lies. Yeah, the lightning is strong enough to stop Hayley from morphing, so she can't even get involved in a monster conflict that much. But at least Hayley comes off more understanding. Super episode 4. Next is Sarah and Hayley getting a focus episode together where we get to meet Hayley's dad, who's a marine biologist, and Sarah's mom return after episode 19. But instead of focusing on Hayley's dynamic with her dad or learning more about their dynamic, we have Sarah and Hayley realizing that their parents are getting along romantically and try to sabotage them while there's a villain trying to flood the city. Do you see the problem? Super episode 14. Hayley has to learn from a security guard about listening to authority, despite the fact that the guy was so focused on being aggressive in his methods and overly strict, yet letting the comic relief duo abuse their authority as hall monitors, to the point where he takes a bomb unknowingly and Hayley has to use his Zord to save him, aka not only wasting original footage on a moral of the day plotline, but also blind authority being wrong being framed as correct. Again, someone not even in the supporting cast is taking more time away from the actual Ranger we are watching the show for, while we have a more interesting guest star in a metal hero. Then we get to Super Episode 19 and 20, the finale. With her plotline with Calvin, kind of concludes and start, but because it's a finale, there's a lot going on, so I wouldn't necessarily call that a focus episode. But we'll talk about that when we talk about how she was mistreated in the relationship. And if you notice that every focus episode, she either has to share screen time with someone to the point where it barely ends up focused on her, or episodes that should be focused on her end up being focused on someone else entirely, or only one of those episodes that I brought up has her role actually contribute to the plot, I think you can see the problem. Everything about her is underexplored. When I said that everything about her is underexplored, which is my second problem, I'd like to bring up the fact that when it comes to everyone in the show, Everyone has at least one attribute about themselves that is continuously referenced to at least 3 episodes. Brody's a ninja with a missing father and brother, for mostly season 1. Preston likes magic, Calvin is into anything mechanical, Sarah's into science, Levi with his music, and for Hayley, that's kind of the problem. You could argue episode 2 with the tennis racket was hinting towards her being interested in tennis in episode 18, and she didn't have any interest in acting until season 2, which we saw with Super episode 6 and the finale, but that's really it. The only thing that's more consistently active that's been around is her dog, which is Cody, which, if you guessed it, you're right. He was able to help out twice in season 1 and once in Super, and was the best part of 2 bad episodes. Justice for Cody and comment. But we really don't even know why she has Cody. Like, you don't need a reason to have a dog, but like, why did she pick him up? Is he stray? Did she save him? I'd like to, learn about that. The worst part is easily her family life. Besides Calvin, the 5 other Rangers all have at least one parent that we saw on screen with implications that her mom is either missing, absent for her life, or dead. But at least for all the ones that we've seen of the other Rangers, they have a focus episode that, at the very least, we understand what their home life is like and the relationship with their parent. With Hayley, we know that her dad is a marine biologist, but that's really nothing there to connect other than the fact that we're told she likes nature and has a dog. But there's no character exploration, which, considering her dad is willing to date, clearly the mom is out of the picture. Her father's device does lead to the subsurface Zord, which, cool, wish the rest of the Zords function like that. The acting part of her character seems to be the one true line they wanted to use for the second half of the show, which isn't a bad idea, but we don't even learn how or why she got into acting, which you would think it might be contradictory to the fact she was described as being outdoorsy, while that's more of an indoor activity, but you could actually use a few examples from both season 1 and the story to justify that. And there is a connection that you can make to the theme of the show being about ninjas, but we'll have to talk about that later. So let's move on to the relationship. Problem 3, framing the mistreated black person in the relationship as overreacting. Now, whenever it comes to shows and boys media, there's this argument that a girl having a crush on a guy automatically ruins their character, and I've routinely pointed out and argued against that, because if you take away the crush and the character is underused and underexplored, the problem is not that they have romantic feelings for a guy. The problem is that they're only tied to the story because of that, with no interesting aspect of themselves whatsoever, because the writers underexplored them. The thing is, even if Calvin and Hayley weren't together, she's underfocused. But even if you focus on the relationship that not only is she still underfocused on, Calvin kind of treats her like crap. Some of it is not intentional or not too harmless, but there's barely any effort on his end to change or grow while she's the one that's doing all the stuff for him. In order, he abandoned her when she needed his help for the race event, actually believed she would give his powers to the villains behind his back, forgot to pick her up despite the fact that she's the one who helped him learn how to drive in the first place, and then took her mother's recipe without her permission, forgot her anniversary, and yet she still forgave him. Then, not even though she didn't find out about this, he wrongly accused her of cheating. Yeah, he didn't know she was in a play, but you would think that you'd be more aware of your girlfriend/partner's activities. He drops out of school and doesn't even give her any heads up or warning until he decides to do it without even talking to her about it. And then we get to the finale. He shows up late again, forgets the equipment that he promised to get for her, wasn't even to help her for performance, and while he did have issues getting there, and he was being honest about her performance, but if he felt that way, he would have tried to show up earlier to help her and decide on doing a different performance. And Sarah tells her afterwards that she overreacted and that Calvin, was getting better, but he clearly hasn't. Calvin has had to make up for his mistakes throughout the story, but he's never gone past his mistakes. Because they break up, he ends up alone to get brainwashed, and she has to infiltrate an entire base of kidnapped civilians and monsters to save him. And afterwards, she's the one who has to apologize to him first. Like, yeah, he's like, oh, I'll try to be more considerate of your feelings, but it's like, maybe actually improve as a boyfriend and show some growth outside of you just being decent at a mechanic? You know, people have always argued about the disposable black love interest trope, and technically this doesn't apply since they are together for 95% of the show, although I will have to talk about the scrap plot line. But no one really talks about how black love interests get treated while they're with that said character. For example, anyone remember back in season 1 of Riverdale when Archie dated Valerie? Which came out of nowhere, but anyone with a brain knew that this was not going to be permanent since he was either going to end up with Veronica or Betty. But the reason they break up was because Cheryl manipulated him into going on a date with her instead, and instead of saying no, he just goes without even telling Valerie. Yeah, he practically cheated on her and ignored her while he was doing it. Oh, so what, you wouldn't want to hook up with Madeline Pretch? I mean, yeah, but if I was dating a black girl, I wouldn't go behind her back to do that. Okay, but Calvin didn't cheat. I know. The point is, Valerie ended up being treated like she's forgettable and disposable, which is why she chose to end the relationship. And in general, you should not be treating your girlfriend or boyfriend like they're disposable. If anything, and usually in media and discourse and spaces, black girls who are love interest tend to get scrutinized the most, and for some really honestly dumb reasons and writing decisions that you could just argue just needed better execution. But this is one of the few times where the majority of the community for Power Rangers involved was on the black girl side. And even with the argument that Hayley overreacted, she's forgiven him for so much before this point, and yet for some reason the writers wanted us to take his side. Also, a quick thing people have gotten mad at and blamed Sarah for is with siding with Calvin. That's less of a character problem as well as an abandoned point I have to address, and more people actually should be putting the blame on the writers because the characters are mostly the vehicles for the writing decisions. But let's get to that scrap breakup plots. Part 5, the scrap breakup plot. She really should have dumped him. This is going to be 5th on the list, but since I talked about this before when I did the relationship plotline issue, I feel like this would have flowed better right here. Basically, there was a cut plot point where the writers were going to have Calvin dump Hayley and end up with Sarah, presumably temporarily, and then they would get back together later in the story. The actresses talked the writers out of doing it, and we don't know if this would have been a one-episode thing or a story plot line, but it does add to the argument that Hayley was mostly there for relationship drama. Now, in the past, I debated whether or not this was a good thing to have in the show by weighing the pros and cons. I mostly decided on it depends on the execution, and that when I get to the end, I'm going to find a way to incorporate. However, based on how Hayley was treated, I feel like it would have been better had the reverse happened and she dumped him instead. Not to end up with Sarah, although for my lesbian fans, the only thing that would be in the way of that ship is that their parents are dating, which can kind of lead to some incest problems. But also because it would send a good message to the target audience that you shouldn't have to deal with someone who hasn't shown any signs of getting better. Not to mention they cut the kiss the actors had actually recorded because it was later revealed that there was a really dumb executive mandate that Power Rangers aren't allowed to kiss each other, with Tommy and Kimberly being the only exception, and that's stupid. And this isn't me being mean for the sake of it. Tanya back in Zeo dumped her boyfriend for doing the exact same thing. Also, people ship Tanya and Adam, including the actors, which got pseudo-confirmed in future installments, so good for them. Okay, problem 5, she never got any original fight footage. The last one I want to bring up is a lack of focus episodes combined with the fight footage. Out of all the episodes where I said she got focused episodes on, they do some original footage for her like her first one, or use good Sentai footage for her like in Monkey Business. But after all of that, it's kind of all over the place. Because Redbot needed a focus episode for some reason, the footage where Hayley and Brody's counterpart fought the monster was used for that, hence the arguing you see in the Sentai footage. The first Halloween special was adapted from an episode where Hayley and Calvin's counterparts had to lead the Megazord, but despite shooting new original footage, they never bothered to do something with that. Heck, her last focus episode before the finale shot original footage of her using the Tigerzord to stop the bomb, but the other Rangers all get original fight scenes with actual monsters to lead into the Sentai footage or justify it later, and yet Hayley was an exception. There's also fight footage I could have used since her counterparts were the sister of the Red and the cousin of Yellow, explaining why they fight together a lot. And a wasted plotline people had with the Sentai counterpart and Ninja was that White wanted to be better than Red, as well as Yellow and White feeling the most inferior since they were the youngest compared to their cousins in Red, Blue, and Pink. The last time I talked about these two, I got some pushback from people who didn't like the Ninja, but I feel like certain Tokusatsu fans forget that when it comes to adaptations, is that you can take something that wasn't executed well from one series and try to improve upon it in another series by actually addressing what the problems were or altering it and by using it better in a new story. So I want to take cues from that there. Okay, now we talk about fixing and rewriting her story. At this point, I want you all to let me know if you would consider my changes and fixes more of a fix or a rewrite. I have to make a bigger video about this in the future, and I've talked about this before in the past. But one of the problems with the Tokusatsu community when it comes to rewrites is that they're so focused on being blinded by hatred that some of the criticisms and fixes don't make any logical sense, or they miss the spirit of what the show was actually going for and the actual criticism that plays the show and how to address it. You don't just fix a show by getting rid of everything you don't like, otherwise you don't have the same show. And while someone might call that fan fiction, that's an insult to good fan fiction. Your change has to make the show the strongest it can be. Second, there's been this debate about whether or not Ninja Steel had too much going on and the fact that it focused on ninjas, high school, the game show, and space. And personally, as someone who's watched Kamen Rider, I don't think that's a valid argument. You can have multiple themes and elements in a show, you just have to execute it well, so that's what this fix and rewrite is going to do. This is going to sound familiar to the two people who watched it, but this time I'm only talking about Hayley, and for everyone else, here's how I'd fix Hayley Foster. First fix is that we actually don't know what led Calvin and Hayley to end up getting together. I think something that could work would be Hayley seeing some guys picking on Calvin in the past, and she defended him so they destroyed her vehicle, and Calvin managed to fix it up, but they needed a few much parts, so Hayley sent Cody to get them, and the two ended up bonding over that. I know not everything needs an explanation, but there's always a reason why two people get together, even if the reason can be shallow, and I would explain why both of them see the best in each other. Second, I think we could keep everything the same in those first couple of episodes, and just have Calvin's first focus episode have him admit that Hayley's like the only person who he feels believes in him. But the next change I would make is in those episodes, especially, everyone agrees that Brody should have been teaching them about ninja life while they teach them about their lives. And because they struggled with this with the footage, we could have Calvin be better when it comes to using the ninja powers, a la the elements, while Hayley, being outdoorsy, is actually pretty good when it comes to physical fights and movements to explain all the flips and acrobatics in the Sentai footage that her counterpart does. In episode 6, the change really needs to be, instead of her having to learn that robo racism isn't bad, have her struggle to learn anything from Redbot, trying to help the others to train, since she struggles with the ninja techniques, and since they're fighting the monster who can brainwash humans but not robots, you can have Hayley use her transformation techniques to disguise herself as Redbot to trick Bad Pipes into destroying the device. You can still keep him saving her, but you have a stronger lesson and growth for Hayley, and you can keep that trick part for later. Before I had said that in episode 11, you could mostly keep. The only difference is that I feel like you could save Aiden's reveal for later down the line, so the finale has a lot more weight. Though in the episode after that, I talked about Calvin feeling like because Hayley and Levi came up with the plan, he feels like he hasn't grown, so making his issue more of a confidence one that plays off her becoming more skilled would actually work pretty well. The only thing I would add towards episode 16, the one that's actually pretty good, is that Hayley was also mad that Calvin should have helped her practice, and since the Sensei footage, we see her struggling to use the Earth Ninja attack, so that pays off for later. The Redbot episode was scrapping and reforging. The finale was only 4 episodes away, so have Galvan X ready to fight Brody, but book Cataclock to fight. Hayley wants to know whether or not Galvan X is telling the truth about treating Brody like a son, and asks Redbot to show her signs of what Brody's life is like on the show. During the fight, Cataclock freezes Brody and cheats, but before Galvan X can finish Brody off, Hayley calls him out for cheating and asks him if he's the so-called father figure to Brody as he claims. Why would a champion accept a cheap win like that? Galvan X explains the fight with Dane weakened him and that he remembered he only beat Dane on a technicality, so he raised Brody to see if he could give him the challenge that Dane could. So Hayley offers a deal. She claims that she's the weakest one, so she offers to fight Cataclock 1v1. She wins, Brody and Galvan X's rematch is safe for the finale, and the team gets unfrozen, and if he wins, she gives up her star. They agree, and Hayley fights seemingly like she's trying, but Clock is about to cheat, so she redirects the blast to free her frozen Brody, so using the footage, they're able to win and free her friends. At the end, explain that Hayley went that far for Brody because her mom was gone from her life at a certain point, and her dad temporarily retired from being a marine biologist to raise her, so it hurt her knowing Galvan X was using Brody. So we can have it that part of her interest in the outdoors and nature and animals is that she wants to both repay the favor to her dad and also have a dream that reflects upon her dad's goals as well as her own, including spreading awareness about the environment. And with Brody and Calvin praising her skills, that can encourage her to pursue acting. Remember how I said I was going to talk about that later? Remember, ninja tactics in fiction and myths revolve around deception, trickery, infiltration, and disguising, and being an actor kind of revolves playing a role in order to trick people into giving you money or swaying people into believing something is real. Considering that Hayley did that in episode 11 and is going to do that at the finale, it actually kind of works out. Now, with the start of season 2, aka Super, for episode 2, we're going to have Hayley and Calvin break up after he forgets her anniversary. He screwed up too many times, and that lie ended up powering a monster's attack. I will change a monster's ability to enhance the electricity based off more negative emotions that he gets from other people, which initially would destabilize the Morphs, but Hayley channels that anger into positivity by helping the Rangers come up with a plan to beat the monster. The episode ends with her deciding to actually do acting by starring in a play, since unlike Calvin, at least she's able to show up on time, and we later see the effects of that in episode 6. But for episode 4, okay, the one where she and Sarah end up guilt-tripping their parents into quote-unquote breaking up, now we actually have a better explanation since we already know that she lost her mom, and now that her ex-boyfriend kind of reminds her that, yeah, she has to focus on herself, she's a little bit worried about her father and then up getting hurt again. Only for her to realize that if something's naturally doing well, sometimes you just have to let things play out and appreciate what you have, since at the end of the day, she would want her dad to be happy romantically even though she's not. Now, for episode 6, this is the one where you can have Calvin actually remember that she is going to act but doesn't want to go to her performance since they spent too many time together as Rangers, and here he'll try to get together with Sarah, except they realize that they have more in common as friends. And even though she agrees with Hayley that he needs to work on himself, you can still keep the memory plotline when the memories get taken, have Hayley's memories be reset to when she and Calvin first started dating, and she admits that this was something new to her, but she had helped him out and he had helped her out that time, and she wants to see if things will work out. You can have Calvin admit that they broke up, and she tells him that whatever happened, if he still really likes her, that she hopes that they'll be able to work it and get back together when she gets her memories back, but that she'll always believe in him. Not only would it lead into the footage where Calvin gets better at fighting, but it would actually paint her and Calvin's relationship in a better light, since it would actually show that she still has feelings for him, and at the end of the episode, you can have him go to her performance and realize that she's still working on herself, so can he, and this is where you have him decide to quit school, and you can keep that as a subplot until the episode where he actually does it. I forgot to add this in the script, but I did notice Hayley's the only ranger who never used a lion fire sword, which is technically a ninja problem too, since the boys used it and Sarah and her counterpart used it, albeit in a more creative way. Hayley nor her counterpart got to use it in the show, but her counterpart Fuka got to use it in the stage show. I don't think she's ever fought a general 1v1, so you can give Hayley the Lion Fire mode in Super Episode 4, where she and Sarah have to destroy the Doomsday Wave device. So while Sarah activates it, just make original fight where Hayley uses the Lion Fire armor to fight off Badana or Odious and force them to retreat. Which, considering they made original suits for Devon and Beast Morphers with Fury mode, the cockpit suits for most of Neo Saban, and giving Amelia an armor she never got to use in Dino Fury with effort placed into the original suit, I think that'd be a good fit for her. As for the Blaze Zords, I actually prefer the method of having the Rangers have a device or personal object that's related to the Zord, and then the prism shows them the image of the potential of that thing becoming a Zord, like the Subsurfer Zord was. And one thing I would add was having Calvin be the ones who mix up the construction, and through the Galactic Ninjas arc, each Ranger would try to associate themselves with a certain animal that would become their Zord, with Hayley's being the tiger. For episode 14, we really don't need Redbot's voice actor with Sheriff Skyfire, so have the conflict being that Skyfire is the ninja sheriff that's actually been going after Galaxy Ward's contestants that were basically slave owners, including Blammo, and he's testing the Rangers to see if they can fight. Everyone does bad during the training, but Hayley and Calvin recognize that the key for them to beat the monster is to target both sides of them, so they help Brody train to figure out how to get the timing right to lead into the footage, and once they realize that they actually work really together better as a team now, they actually start showing hints that they might want to get back together. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about Calvin too much until the relationship aspect is a plot point, but because this is the episode where I would change certain things, this would be the time where he decides to go back to school, but have it that he actually applies everything he learns to fix the Lion Fire Zord after Hayley ends up being the last one standing from a monster attack, so he saves her from getting hurt, so he unlocks the Lion Fire armor in a way that feels earned, and not just because he feels like he wants to become a mechanic for NASA or the Power Rangers equivalent, and after all that growth, now he wants to get back together with Hayley. For the finale, which we are making either 3 or 4 parts, because saying that finale was rushed as all hell would be an understatement, actually have a normal audition that Hayley's going to apply for at the end of the school year while they're having summer break, and this time he's able to show up, but she isn't selected because it turns out that she didn't properly look up what the role was about, and he tries to cheer her up and tells her that he wants to get back together, but she refuses because she's not really in the mood, which would actually justify the claim that she was overreacting, since at this point we see both of them work on their flaws. Then you have her wanting to go to apologize only for him to get brainwashed. This leads into Hayley and Sarah storming the Warrior Dome to free him, and this time we're having the two fight, but we're going to have them fight morphed. The reason why they weren't morphed was because the spaceship for the villains had a Ranger detection system, but at this point Hayley and Calvin are both next to the satellite, so you could basically just have them transform and fight, and this is where we actually pay off that plot line of Hayley being better physically but Calvin being better in ninja techniques. Make this an intense fight, both of them going back and forth, but Calvin ultimately wins the struggle and Hayley is still holding on for her life, but just as he's about to end her, she shoots his sword out of his hands and sends it blasting to the satellite to destroy the mind control. Then you can have the kiss and have it revealed that Calvin signed Hayley's name into another audition for a rival show for the rival company that she was applying for. And this time they can work together since this time he's actually prepared to help her. After they defeat Odious, we know Hayley's going to do that for the audition, while Calvin's at least academically prepared for the next semester and prepared to help her out. So, conclusion time. That was a lot, wasn't it? Can't say I'm surprised there. You know, the funny thing is, when I looked around, it turns out that a lot of people actually don't hate Hayley. In fact, the general consensus seems to be that she's a pleasant character to watch, but she sadly got little to do and little focus. Heck, there's more people that say she should have dumped Calvin. I can't really blame anyone for feeling like that, but again, if the show wanted them to break up and eventually get back together, I feel like there was a better way to do that as well as fleshing out her character more. Especially considering someone made the argument that her character wasn't allowed to grow because all she did was just apologize to people, and it just feels like you're using the character than actually doing something interesting with the character or letting them grow. And like a main character in 44 episodes not getting a single focus episode to just herself, and only about 2 of them actually being pretty good, that's terrible regardless of her race and background. So if I decide to call this the most mistreated black woman in modern Power Rangers, I do not take that statement lightly. There have been African American Rangers in this era of Neo Saban that have had problems too, but at the very least they were all given something. And there are a lot of fans of Hayley who wish she got the justice she deserved. And you know me, I hate wasted potential, and when some people see trash, I see potential treasure. So if you made it this far, you can also type Happy Black History Month. Let me know what other characters in Power Rangers or Tokusatsu you felt was underexplored or underfocused on. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, because anytime I talk about Tokusatsu on the channel, it has historically been a mixed bag in terms of receptions, views, and ratings. And I would really like all your support, even if you disagree with this video. But thank you all for watching, and BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.